that people feel like that this is the best job in sports. It's not, okay? There are multiple players from California, DeMar DeRozan, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Paul George. None of them wanted to go play there. Kawhi Leonard is a free agent. He's from California. He does not want to go play there.
Why?
So this idea, because here's what happens.
You have to have a small circle of people you trust, and you have to do the work, because there's no amount of hiring PR people.
The line has finally been drawn. And this time, it wasn't in a private meeting or a leaked report. It was in the middle of the Lakers' practice court, in front of the entire team. LeBron James, the face of the franchise, the undisputed king, stepped so far over the line that the owner, Jeanie Buss, had no choice. She didn't call him into her office. She didn't send a formal memo. She walked onto his turf, stood before him and his teammates, and issued a public, humiliating warning. What did LeBron do that was so egregious? And what does this unprecedented nuclear confrontation mean for the future of the Lakers? This is the story of the day the owner reclaimed her team. The air in the UCLA Health Training Center was already thick with the tension of a late-season skid. The Lakers, once looking like a secure playoff team, were now clinging to a play-in tournament spot, and the frustration was palpable. It was during a final walkthrough of a critical out-of-bounds play, one designed to get a quick two-pointer in a late-game scenario, that the fragile structure finally snapped. The play call came from an assistant coach, a veteran with over a decade of NBA experience. As the team moved through the initial action, LeBron James, positioned at the top of the key, visibly grimaced. The play required him to set a down screen for a shooter before flaring to the corner, a decoy action to clear space. On the third walkthrough, with the same minor timing error from a young wing, LeBron stopped dead in his tracks. The squeak of his sneakers cutting through the gym's silence was like a gunshot. "Stop, just stop," he said, his voice low but carrying across the empty seats. He turned to the assistant coach, not the head coach. "We're not running this. This is garbage. It's not going to work." The assistant, clipboard in hand, began to explain the read. LeBron cut him off, not with a shout, but with a dismissive, cold finality. "I'm not running it. We run the stack play, the one we use. This," he said, gesturing vaguely at the whiteboard, "is a waste of time." The violation was not the criticism of the play. It was the total public dismissal of the chain of command. He didn't suggest an adjustment to the head coach. He didn't call a player-only huddle. He directly countermanded a coach's instruction in front of the entire organization, rendering the staff's authority null and void. The head coach stood frozen, his authority evaporating by the second. The young player who messed up looked at the floor, wishing it would swallow him. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. The line between superstar and sovereign had not just been crossed, it had been erased. Word travels at light speed in a confined space. Within minutes, a senior basketball operations executive witnessing the entire scene was on the phone. The description was blunt. "He just fired an assistant coach in front of the team. You need to come down now." Jeanie Buss was in her office, reviewing financial projections. She listened for 15 seconds before hanging up. She did not call Rob Pelinka. She did not summon LeBron. She stood up, smoothed her blazer, and walked directly to the practice floor, a queen entering a revolting colony. The mutiny was about to meet its sovereign.
Huge free agent signing, to say the least. What would your dad think of this right now, Jeanie?
You know, it felt, very like a familiar feeling that when we got Shaquille O'Neal as a free agent in 1996, it kind of felt.
First of all, smart man, LeBron. He is about to go into a summer where he's trying to negotiate a new contract. He wants the max. He wants $54 million a year for 3 years until he's 42 years old.
Jeanie Buss's entrance onto the practice floor was not a storming. It was a procession. The clicking of her heels on the hardwood was a metronome in the suffocating silence. Every player, every coach, every staffer felt their spines straighten, a primal response to the arrival of ultimate authority. She walked past the gawking players, past the stunned head coach, past the humiliated assistant. Her eyes were locked on one man. She stopped a few feet from LeBron James. He was still in his practice jersey, sweating, the physical embodiment of the franchise's on-court power. She was in a tailored suit, the embodiment of its off-court, permanent power. "LeBron," she said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The silence was so complete it amplified her words like a stadium speaker. "What is happening right now is unacceptable." She didn't wait for a defense, an explanation. She continued, her gaze sweeping briefly to include the entire Rapt team before returning to him. "You do not speak to a member of my staff that way, ever. You do not countermand a coach's instruction in my facility. This is not a debate. This is not a suggestion." She took a half step closer, her tone etching each word into the gym's walls. "You are a player for the Los Angeles Lakers. You are not the general manager. You are not the coach. Your role is to execute, to lead by example, and to respect the structure of this organization." She paused, letting the weight of the word my staff, my facility sink in. She was defining the relationship in the clearest possible terms: landlord and tenant, employer and employee. "I have supported you. This organization has supported you. We built a championship team for you. We have honored every commitment. But there is one commitment you seem to have forgotten: your commitment to be part of this team, not above it." The final sentence was the knife twist. It reframed his entire tenure. It was no longer about his greatness elevating the Lakers, but about the Lakers providing the platform for Hayes' greatness. She was rewiring the narrative of their partnership in real time. "This stops today, right now. You will apologize to coach, you will finish this practice following the instructions you were given, and you will remember from this moment forward who you work for." She didn't ask for an acknowledgement. She simply held his gaze, a monarch awaiting a subject's acquiescence. The standoff lasted a lifetime and 5 seconds. LeBron's jaw was set, his expression unreadable. Finally, he gave a single, sharp nod. It wasn't deferential. It was an acknowledgement of a reality he could no longer ignore. Without another word, Jeanie Buss turned. Her exit was as deliberate as her entrance. The door to the offices shut with a soft click. On the floor, the kingdom had been redefined. The king had just been shown, in front of his entire court, that there was a higher throne, and it had just been sat upon.
I mean, if there was a script writer writing a script, you probably wouldn't have him playing at this well at this age.
He's unbelievable.
He's unbelievable. So, and he showed us in the Olympics, he's the best player in the world, and so, he can play however long he wants to play.
A clip of 40 plus. Jaylen Brown from the mid-range, a moonball.
Yes, Week Fade.
Coach of the month, which he was stoked about, as you can imagine. Joe just thrilled, gushing about how much that means to him.
For a full minute after Jeanie Buss left, the practice gym remained a frozen tableau. No one moved. The assistant coach, still clutching his clipboard, looked like a man who had survived a landslide he never saw coming. The head coach finally broke the stasis with a weak clap of his hands. "All right, let's pick it up from the top." His voice lacked all conviction. The play was run again, mechanically, with LeBron moving through his motions with a chilling, silent precision. The life, the competitive fire had been vacuumed out of the room. This was no longer a basketball practice. It was the forced march of a defeated army. The locker room afterward was a museum of quiet panic. Players dressed in near silence, avoiding eye contact. The usual post-practice banter, the music, the loud debates about last night's games, none of it existed. The air was thick with unasked questions. Veteran players, those who had navigated the politics of NBA locker rooms for years, understood the seismic shift. They had just witnessed the destruction of a power dynamic that had governed their professional lives for half a decade. LeBron was not just the best player, he was the system, and the system had just been publicly rebooted by its original programmer. Younger players and rookies were terrified. Their world, which orbited securely around the sun of LeBron's influence, had just been knocked out of its access. Who did they listen to now? The coach, whose authority was just exposed as a loan from the owner, or LeBron, whose authority had just been publicly revoked? Every interaction felt like a potential loyalty test. A simple conversation about a defensive scheme could be interpreted as taking a side in a war they wanted no part of. The coaching staff retreated to their offices, doors closed. There was no victory in their quarters. While the owner had defended their position, she had also exposed its fragility. Their authority was now explicitly borrowed, contingent on her willingness to enforce it. They were less like leaders and more like middle managers who had just had the CEO intervene in a staff meeting. Any future attempt to coach LeBron, to hold him accountable, would be shadowed by the memory of this moment. Could they ever truly coach him again, or would they just be managing him, walking on eggshells around the franchise's most important and now most publicly chastised asset? Meanwhile, in the owner's suite, Jeanie Buss was undoubtedly facing her own reckoning. The move was the ultimate high-stakes gamble. She had restored order, but at what cost? She had potentially alienated the most powerful athlete in the sport, one who was central to her franchise's valuation, relevance, and short-term hopes. She had chosen the long-term health of the Lakers' institutional authority over the immediate harmony required to win a championship. The practice court was quiet, but the repercussions were just beginning to reverberate, shaking the foundation of the franchise from the locker room stalls to the luxury suites. The warning had been delivered. Now everyone waited to see what the king would do next.
Bus rides and plane rides, things of that nature. It's challenging. It's challenging, for sure. It was a very challenging season, for me, for our ball club. And obviously, we know what went on early on or whatever the case may be, but it was a pretty cool ride. But I don't know. I think it was okay.
LeBron had a bit of a rocky start last year, at least compared to his lofty standards. And I think we have to remember that he had some poor shooting games. He had some high turnover games. He had some rough defensive games where we were questioning, can LeBron still?
The basketball world braced for an explosion. They expected a fiery social media post from LeBron, a cryptic quote about control or respect. They anticipated his camp leaking a scorching rebuttal, painting Jeanie Buss as an out-of-touch owner disrespecting a legend. The media phones were primed to ring. The explosion never came. Instead, there was a void, a profound, strategic silence. LeBron James became a ghost in plain sight. At the next team practice, he was the first on the court, putting up methodical jump shots. He went through drills with robotic efficiency. During film sessions, he sat in the back, listening. When coaches spoke, he nodded. When plays were installed, he asked clarifying questions about his assignment, and only his assignment. He was the model of a focused, compliant employee. The charismatic orchestrator, the vocal floor general, had vanished. In his place was a supremely talented basketball robot executing code. This was not surrender. This was a tactical nuclear option, compliance as a weapon. By becoming the perfect silent soldier, LeBron accomplished several devastating objectives. First, he completely disarmed the ownership's narrative. They could no longer paint him as a disruptive force. He was following every rule exactly as written. Second, he exposed the Lakers' hidden dependency. The team's system, its late-game execution, its offensive flow, much of it relied on LeBron's mind, his audibles, his improvisational genius. By withdrawing that intellectual capital, by strictly following the playbook even when he saw it failing, he highlighted the coaching staff's limitations. He was giving them exactly what they asked for, and in doing so, he was demonstrating its insufficiency. The on-court evidence was immediate and telling. In the first game after the incident, the Lakers' offense was stiff, predictable. They ran sets to completion, even when defenses sniffed them out. The spontaneous, connective plays that LeBron typically generates, the unexpected cross-court passes, the quick-hitter actions he calls on the fly were absent. The team lost to an inferior opponent. In the post-game press conference, LeBron was polite and bland. "We just didn't execute down the stretch," he said, a statement that was technically true but spiritually hollow. He didn't call out teammates, he didn't question strategy, he offered corporate cliches, the verbal equivalent of his new on-court persona. This silent strike put the entire organization in an impossible bind. How do you criticize a player for being too obedient? How do you beg for the return of the very leadership you just publicly subordinated? Jeanie Buss had won the battle for authority, but LeBron, through his silent, perfect retreat, was winning the war for necessity. He was proving that the Lakers needed his mind more than they needed their structure. The owner had reclaimed her throne, but the king had just walked out of the palace, taking the kingdom's spirit with him. The standoff was no longer a war of words. It was a cold war of absence, and the arena was getting colder by the day.
Tell you what, no. I'm just defending his argument, but
Okay.
I'm gonna tell you why LeBron. It's because whoever has the most to lose is always the biggest loser when things go poorly. And to me, Magic, again, he's a quitter in things that are hard and difficult.
Wow.
He's a I mean, my God, he quit his TV show twice.
You're right in all that, but that's not.
LeBron's silent compliance strike did not unify the Lakers. It shattered them into warring factions, each with a different vision of survival and a different answer to the agonizing question, whose side are you on? Within the locker room, a brutal, unspoken loyalty test played out daily. Veteran players who had tied their careers to LeBron's orbit, those who received his passes, benefited from his gravity, and signed with the Lakers to play with him, were now trapped. Their on-court success was linked to his full engagement, but publicly supporting him meant risking the wrath of an owner who had just shown her power. They chose a desperate, neutral pragmatism, offering hollow, "we just need to play harder" statements to the press, while avoiding any meaningful interaction with either side. They were hostages. The younger players and role athletes faced a more existential crisis. Their development, their next contract, their very place in the league, often hinged on LeBron's approval and mentorship. That guidance had now ceased. He was polite but distant, a CEO who'd stopped holding office hours. Do they seek out the coaches, aligning themselves with the official power structure, and risk being ostracized by the team's still dominant cultural force? Or do they try to quietly appeal to LeBron, hoping to reignite his investment in their growth? Most froze, their performance becoming hesitant and erratic, mirroring the organization's paralysis. The fan base erupted into a digital civil war. Forums and social media became toxic battlegrounds. One camp, flying the flags of tradition, hailed Jeanie Buss as a hero. "No one is bigger than the Lakers," trended among them. They argued that LeBron's tantrum proved the legends right, that he was a brilliant mercenary, not a true Laker. They were willing to endure losing if it meant reclaiming the soul of the franchise from a single player's empire. The opposing camp, the pro-LeBron faction, watched the team's sterile, losing basketball with seething rage. To them, Jeanie Buss had committed an unforgivable act of corporate sabotage. She'd rather be the queen of a lottery team than share the throne with a king, was their battle cry. They saw LeBron's silence not as petulance, but as the dignified response of a wronged legend, proving his value by withdrawing it. They flooded comment sections with stats and highlights, a constant reminder of what was being squandered. This schism reached the broader NBA ecosystem. Agents began whispering to clients about Lakers' dysfunction. Prospective free agents, watching the very public unraveling of the superstar-owner relationship, now saw LA as a potential minefield of competing powers rather than a glamorous destination. The Lakers' brand, built on a legacy of united excellence, was now synonymous with public, self-inflicted conflict. The confrontation on the practice court hadn't just corrected a player, it had triggered an identity crisis for the entire franchise, alienating its own players, dividing its fans, and damaging its allure to the outside world. The kingdom wasn't just at war, it was burning, and the two monarchs were watching from opposite towers.
Restate the case and win the room, and then boom, you get to fire him. But what Magic kept saying, no fun. I'm only here part-time. I have other things to do. He didn't want to put in the work it's necessary to swing that hammer.
That's what I struggle with. It's like, okay, you weren't allowed to make the decision, supposedly, but you weren't doing.
The silence has hardened into a permanent state. The Lakers are no longer a basketball team. They are a high-stakes, passive-aggressive standoff with a schedule of games. Every loss is a whispered "I told you so" from one faction to the other. Every hesitant play is a symptom of the deeper sickness. We have now reached the inevitable juncture where all paths forward are paved with loss. There are no good options, only choices about what kind of disaster the franchise will choose to endure. One road is one of absolute principle. The owner can stay the course, enforcing the new, rigid hierarchy, betting that the institution of the Lakers is stronger than the talent of any one man. This path is clean in principle, but catastrophic in practice. It leads directly to LeBron James' departure, either via a trade that would be impossible to win or through free agency. It means voluntarily entering the desert of a long rebuild during the final years of a superstar she already has. It is a bet on the past, on the power of the logo alone to attract the next savior, while the current one walks away, taking the team's relevance with him. Another road leads to a dramatic, empire-shattering exit. LeBron could decide the partnership is irrevocably broken. The public humiliation and the subsequent icy stalemate could motivate him to seek a final act elsewhere, with a franchise willing to grant him the partnership and respect he believes he's earned. This path offers him a fresh narrative and control over his exit. But it would mean leaving Los Angeles under a cloud of conflict, cementing his Lakers' legacy as one of brilliant yet ultimately explosive triumph. He would be the conqueror who was expelled from the kingdom he restored. The most likely and most dangerous path is a forced, fragile truce, a private, closed-door summit, a handshake for the cameras, bland statements about shared goals and moving forward together. LeBron would re-engage, the coaches would regain a semblance of voice, but the trust is annihilated. Every future disagreement, every losing streak will be filtered through the memory of the practice court. The coaches will always wonder if pushing him will trigger another nuclear option. LeBron will always know his influence has a hard public limit. This isn't peace, it's a cold war fought with polite smiles. It avoids an immediate explosion by wiring the building with dynamite, ensuring any spark of adversity could blow the whole thing apart. It saves the present by guaranteeing a future of walking on eggshells and quiet, corrosive dread. This was never about a play call. It was the final volcanic eruption of a fault line that had been grinding for years, the fault between institutional permanence and individual transcendence. Jeanie Buss defended the idea that the Lakers are a centuries-old redwood, weathering every storm, outlasting every passing season. LeBron James demonstrated that he is not just a season, he is the very climate in which the tree grows. Remove it, and the ecosystem dies. In the end, there are no victors. The owner proved the crown is removable, but may have fatally wounded the reign. The king proved his indispensability, but by choosing to withhold his full self, he revealed a partnership now operating on life support. The final, haunting question isn't about who was right. It's this: after you have shown a king the limits of his power, can you ever again ask him to rule? The next move will define a legacy and a franchise for a decade. Subscribe to witness history's verdict.